He watched the mysterious woman glide across the ballroom, her beauty silencing the elite crowd. Every lord wanted her, every lady envied her. When he finally claimed a dance, her perfume smelled faintly of a forgotten memory. "Who are you?" he whispered. She smiled coldly. "Your wife? Your grace?" London society in the autumn of 1884 was a ruthless, glittering beast, and Christopher Danvers, the 8th Duke of Oakhaven, was its reluctant prey. The Danvers family possessed a title older than the Tudor dynasty, an ancestral seat in Derbyshire that rivaled royal palaces, and absolutely no money. Christopher's late father had gambled away the family fortune on bad investments and racehorses, leaving his heir with a crumbling estate, staggering debts, and an ultimatum from his creditors. The only salvation lay in the booming industries of the North. Enter Josiah Ashcroft, a ruthless railway magnate who possessed millions in the bank, but lacked the one thing his money couldn't buy: aristocratic blood. The arrangement was swift, brutal, and entirely transactional. The Duke of Oakhaven would marry Ashcroft's only daughter, and in exchange, the Danvers' debts would vanish overnight. That daughter was Matilda. To the high society of London, Matilda Ashcroft was a tragic joke. 21 years old, she was fiercely intelligent, but completely devoid of the superficial charms required of a duchess. She was painfully shy, hiding her sharp mind behind thick, wire-rimmed reading spectacles. Her hair, a heavy, unmanageable mass of ash blonde, was perpetually scraped back into severe, matronly buns that pulled painfully at her scalp. Her mother had passed away when she was young, leaving her with no guidance on fashion or deportment. Consequently, Matilda drowned her petite frame in drab, olive green, and muddy brown gowns with high collars that made her look like a perpetually mourning governess. On the day of their wedding at St. Gilbert's, Hanover Square, Christopher barely looked at her. He was a devastatingly handsome man of 28, with striking, stormy gray eyes and an aristocratic jawline that had broken hearts across the continent. He stood at the altar radiating a palpable, freezing resentment. To Christopher, Matilda was the living embodiment of his failure, the physical proof that the mighty Duke of Oakhaven had been forced to sell his title to trade. The ceremony was brief. There was no kiss, only a stiff bow. As they climbed into the opulent carriage waiting outside, the door clicking shut on the cheering crowds, Christopher finally spoke his first private words to his new bride. "Let us drop the pretense, madam," he said, his voice as smooth and cold as marble. He reached into his tailored tailcoat and handed her a single train ticket. "Your father has his prize. He may call his daughter a duchess, but I will not have my life dictated by a ledger book." Matilda, her hands trembling in her oversized lace gloves, looked at the ticket. It was for a one-way journey to Highcliffe Manor, the most remote, weather-beaten, and dilapidated property the Danvers family owned, situated on the unforgiving cliffs of Cornwall. "Cornwall?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the clatter of the carriage wheels. "But my place is by your side. Your Grace, I am your wife." Christopher offered a cruel, mocking smile. "You are my financier, Matilda, nothing more. London is my world, and it would eat you alive. The sea air will do you good. I have my life, and you shall have yours. We need not cross paths unless absolute necessity dictates." By nightfall, Matilda was on a train heading west, alone, weeping quietly into her handkerchief as the rain lashed against the glass. For 3 long, agonizing years, Matilda lived in exile at Highcliffe Manor. The house was enormous, drafty, and isolated. The crashing waves of the Atlantic were her only companions. True to his word, Christopher never sent for her. He visited exactly once a year for a single afternoon, accompanied by his solicitors to sign estate papers. During these visits, he would sit in the library, drink a glass of brandy, ask polite, perfunctory questions about the roof repairs, and leave before dinner. He never looked her in the eye. Meanwhile, society papers, which the local postmaster eagerly delivered, told Matilda everything about her husband's life. Christopher was the king of the London season. He hosted lavish parties at his newly restored Mayfair townhouse, restored with her father's money. Worse, the gossip columns frequently linked him to Lady Clementine Brandon, a dazzling, raven-haired widow known for her scandalous dresses and sharp wit. Matilda endured the humiliation in silence. She read voraciously, walked the cliffs, and accepted her fate as the forgotten, plain Duchess. She believed she deserved it. She believed she was unlovable. Until the cold, rainy morning of November 1887, a messenger arrived from London bearing 2 letters. The first was from her father's solicitors. Josiah Ashcroft had passed away from a sudden heart failure. The second was a letter addressed to the Duke of Oakhaven, which had been accidentally forwarded to Cornwall by a careless secretary in London. Matilda, grieving and numb, opened the solicitor's letter first. It contained a revelation that stopped her heart. Before he died, her father had used the new Married Women's Property Act of 1882 to establish an impenetrable, secret trust. He had left his vast, remaining personal fortune, millions of pounds in railway shares, entirely to Matilda. Christopher had no legal right to touch a single penny of it. She was, overnight, one of the wealthiest independent women in the British Empire. Still reeling, she opened the second envelope, assuming it was estate business. It was not. It was a misdirected letter from Christopher to his closest confidant, Lord Gilbert Hastings. Matilda's eyes scanned her husband's elegant handwriting, and the blood drained from her face. "You ask about the Cornish situation, Gilbert. The Duchess's remains firmly planted in the mud where she belongs. I visited last month. She looked more like a dreary, frightened field mouse than ever, stammering behind those atrocious spectacles. It is a small price to pay for Oakhaven's restoration. Next week, I plan to take Clementine to the opera. Let the gossips talk. My wife is quite content fading into the damp wallpaper of Highcliffe. She hasn't the spine to object, nor the wit to care." Matilda stared at the ink. The paper trembled in her hands. The deep, aching sadness that had defined her for 3 years evaporated in a single, blinding flash of sheer, unadulterated fury. He didn't just ignore her. He despised her. He thought her a coward, a field mouse. Matilda walked to the grand fireplace in the drawing room and dropped the letter into the flames. She watched the words burn and curl into ash. She walked over to the gilded mirror hanging above the mantelpiece and stared at her reflection. She saw the severe hair, the drab dress, the heavy glasses. "A field mouse," she whispered to the empty room. She took off her glasses. The world blurred slightly, but her vision was clear enough to see the sudden, dangerous fire in her own blue eyes. "We shall see about that, Your Grace." 3 days later, the staff at Highcliffe Manor were stunned when the Duchess of Oakhaven ordered her trunks packed. But she did not purchase a ticket to London to confront her husband. She purchased a ticket to Paris. Arriving in France, under her maiden name, Miss Ashcroft, Matilda rented an opulent suite at the Hotel Ritz. With her newfound, staggering wealth at her absolute disposal, she sought out the one woman in Europe who could help her, Madame Céline Dubois. Céline was a legend in Parisian high society, a retired aristocratic modiste who had once styled the Empress of France. She was known for her brutal honesty and her unparalleled eye for beauty. Matilda secured an audience by paying a small fortune just to step through Céline's doors. The elderly Frenchwoman circled Matilda in her grand parlor, inspecting her like a thoroughbred horse. She knocked Matilda's spectacles off her face with a flick of her fan. "You squint," Céline noted, her thick accent dripping with disdain. "Why?" "I am nearsighted," Matilda said, lifting her chin defensively. "Then only read when you are alone," Céline snapped. "In public, a woman does not need to see across the room. She only needs to ensure the room sees her. Your posture is atrocious. You carry the weight of an ungrateful man on your shoulders. Stand up." Céline struck Matilda's back lightly with her cane. Matilda straightened, her spine aligning. Better, Celine murmured, her eyes narrowing. You have been told you are plain. They are fools. English fools with no taste. You are not plain, my dear. You are a masterpiece that has been covered in mud. We shall wash it off. For the next 6 months, Matilda did not exist. She became a project. The physical transformation was grueling. Celine hired masters of dance and deportment. Matilda spent hours walking across polished hardwood floors, balancing heavy encyclopedias on her head, learning to glide rather than trudge. She was taught how to hold a fan to convey mystery, how to tilt her head to catch the gaslight, and how to smile with a devastating, knowing coldness. Then came the aesthetic overhaul. Her hair, long tortured by tight pins, was washed in chamomile and expensive oils, cut to frame her delicate face, and arranged in soft, cascading waves of spun gold. Without the heavy, wire-rimmed glasses obscuring her features, Matilda's true face emerged. High, elegant cheekbones, a sharp, aristocratic jawline, and large, piercing sapphire eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. Celine burned Matilda's entire wardrobe. Olive green is for the infantry, she declared. Instead, she draped Matilda in rich, commanding jewel tones. Emerald silks that brought out the fire in her hair. Midnight blues that made her eyes look dangerous. Deep crimsons that demanded absolute attention. The cuts were scandalous by London's conservative standards. Dresses that cinched her waist tightly, exposed the elegant curve of her collarbone, and moved like liquid when she walked. As her exterior changed, so did her interior. The timid, stuttering girl who wept on the train to Cornwall died in Paris. In her place emerged a woman of immense wealth, profound education, and cold, calculating confidence. She learned to speak flawless, aristocratic French. She learned to waltz, not as a follower, but as a partner who commanded the floor. By the spring of 1888, the metamorphosis was complete. Matilda looked into Celine's floor-to-ceiling mirror and did not recognize the woman staring back. She looked like royalty. She looked lethal. Word reached Paris that His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, was hosting a spectacular royal masquerade ball at Marlborough House in May to mark the beginning of the London season. It was the most exclusive invitation of the decade. Every peer of the realm would be there, and Christopher Danvers, Duke of Oakhaven, would undoubtedly be in attendance, likely with his mistress on his arm. "It is time," Matilda told Celine as she packed her custom-made Louis Vuitton trunks. "Do not let him see your heart, ma chérie," Celine warned, kissing her cheeks. "Men like the Duke only respect what they cannot conquer." "He will not see my heart," Matilda replied smoothly. "Because he no longer owns it." Matilda returned to London under a shroud of absolute secrecy. She did not go to Oakhaven House. Instead, using her father's solicitors, she leased a magnificent mansion in Belgravia. Through her Parisian connections, she secured the protection and escort of Monsieur Laurent, the charismatic and highly respected French ambassador to London, who was thoroughly amused by the beautiful Englishwoman's desire for a dramatic entrance. The night of the royal ball was thick with London fog, but inside Marlborough House, it was a blinding spectacle of diamonds, champagne, and power. Christopher Danvers stood near the grand staircase, looking bored. He was dressed impeccably in evening tails, a black silk half-mask covering his eyes, though everyone knew exactly who he was. Lady Clementine Brandon clung to his arm, laughing shrilly at a joke made by Lord Hastings. Christopher sipped his champagne, feeling the familiar, hollow emptiness of high society. It was all so predictable, so dull. Then, the orchestra seemed to falter for a fraction of a second. A strange, rippling silence washed over the ballroom, starting near the entrance and spreading like a tidal wave toward the center. Christopher frowned, turning his head. Standing at the top of the grand marble staircase was Monsieur Laurent, and on his arm was a woman who stopped the breath in Christopher's lungs. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet, cut perfectly to accentuate a slender, exquisite figure. The fabric caught the light of the 1,000 crystal chandeliers, shimmering like a starry night. Her skin was flawless porcelain. Her hair was an intricate crown of golden waves, woven with subtle diamond pins. A delicate, silver filigree masquerade mask covered the upper half of her face, but it only enhanced the piercing, mesmerizing blue of her eyes. She held a silk fan with the casual arrogance of a queen. She was, without a doubt, the most breathtaking woman Christopher had ever seen in his life. "Good heavens," Lord Hastings muttered beside him, nearly dropping his glass. "Who on earth is that?" "I have no idea," Christopher whispered, his heart suddenly hammering against his ribs. He felt a magnetic pull, a primal urge to step forward. "But I intend to find out." He detached himself from a thoroughly annoyed Lady Clementine and moved through the parting crowd. As the mysterious woman descended the stairs, her gaze swept over the room with cool indifference. For one fleeting, electrifying second, those sapphire eyes locked onto Christopher. A tiny, knowing smirk played on her crimson lips before she looked away. The field mouse had returned to London, and she was about to burn the Duke's world to the ground. The opulent ballroom of Marlborough House was a sensory overload of gilded mirrors, cascading orchids, and the finest string orchestra in England. His Royal Highness, Albert Edward, the Prince of Wales, was holding court near the punch bowls, surrounded by sycophants and politicians like Lord Randolph Churchill. Yet, even the future King of England paused mid-sentence as the mysterious woman in midnight blue velvet descended the grand staircase. Christopher Danvers felt his pulse thrum against his throat. He completely ignored the sharp, indignant gasp of Lady Clementine Brandon, whose manicured fingers dug into his velvet sleeve. Smoothly, coldly, he detached himself from his mistress. "Excuse me, Clementine," he murmured, his eyes never leaving the vision on the stairs. "I have diplomatic business with the French ambassador." He intercepted Monsieur Laurent at the edge of the dance floor, just as the orchestra struck up a sweeping Viennese waltz. Laurent, a shrewd man with a perfectly waxed mustache, smiled knowingly as the Duke approached. "Ah, Your Grace," Laurent greeted him, his accent thick. "A magnificent evening, is it not?" "Indeed, monsieur," Christopher replied smoothly, though his stormy gray eyes were locked onto the woman standing beside the ambassador. Up close, she was even more devastating. The silver filigree mask obscured her cheekbones, but her lips were painted a dangerous shade of carmine, curved into a faint, utterly unreadable smile. "I do not believe I have had the pleasure of an introduction to your companion." "Allow me," Laurent said, bowing slightly. "May I present my ward, the Comtesse Mathilde de la Roche. She is visiting London for the season. Mathilde, this is Christopher Danvers, the Duke of Oakhaven." Mathilde. The name sent a strange, momentary ghost of a chill down Christopher's spine, a fleeting memory of a rain-soaked carriage and a weeping girl. But he dismissed it instantly. The creature standing before him was a goddess of high European society. She had absolutely nothing in common with the drab, stuttering field mouse he had banished to Cornwall. "Comtesse," Christopher said, executing a flawless, sweeping bow. "You outshine every diamond in this room. Would you do me the absolute honor of this waltz?" Matilda looked at him. For 3 years, she had dreamt of the moment she would see him again. She had anticipated anger, sorrow, or perhaps a lingering resentment. But as she met his gaze, she felt nothing but cold, triumphant power. The great, arrogant Duke of Oakhaven was looking at her like a starving man staring at a feast. "You are bold, Your Grace," Matilda replied in flawless, aristocratic French, her voice a low, melodic purr that Celine had trained into her. "But I suppose I can spare a few minutes for the English nobility." She placed her gloved hand in his. The moment they touched, Christopher pulled her onto the floor, his hand resting firmly on the waist of her scandalous midnight blue gown. They began to sweep across the polished marble, moving in perfect, fluid synchronization. You dance beautifully, Comtesse, Christopher murmured, leaning in closer than propriety dictated. He breathed in deeply. Beneath the rich, expensive scent of Parisian jasmine, there was something else, a faint, earthy sweetness, faint notes of orange blossom. It smelled exactly like a forgotten memory, though he could not place it. And you flatter too easily, Duke, she parried, her sapphire eyes sparkling behind the silver mask. I have heard the whispers of London. They say the Duke of Oakhaven is a man who takes what he wants and discards what he finds inconvenient. A man who judges a book entirely by its gilded cover. Christopher tightened his grip on her waist, thrilled by her defiance. The women of London fawned over him. They never challenged him. The whispers of London are often exaggerated, Comtesse. I am merely a man who appreciates rare beauty when it graces my presence. Tell me, what brings you to our damp shores? Business, Matilda said simply, her gaze drifting over his shoulder to where Lady Clementine was, glaring daggers at them. I am here to settle an old debt. Someone stole something incredibly valuable from me a few years ago. I intend to collect it, with absolute interest. A thief? Christopher asked, genuinely intrigued. Give me a name, and I shall have Scotland Yard hunt them down for you by morning. Matilda let out a soft, musical laugh that made Christopher's heart skip a beat. Oh, no, Your Grace. This is a very personal matter. The man I am hunting believes he is completely untouchable. He believes his victim is weak, a coward. What is the English phrase? Ah, yes, a field mouse. Christopher froze. His boots nearly missed a step in the waltz. A field mouse. The exact phrase he had written in his private letter to Gilbert Hastings. He stared down at her, a sudden, inexplicable dread pooling in his stomach. Where did you hear that phrase? Before he could demand an answer, the heavy grandfather clock in the grand hall began to chime midnight. The masquerade's unmasking hour had arrived. The crowd around them began to cheer, untying ribbons and revealing their faces. Matilda stepped back, gracefully slipping from his arms. The music has stopped, Your Grace. Wait, Christopher said, reaching for her wrist, a sudden desperate panic seizing him. Take off your mask. Let me see you. Not tonight, Duke, she whispered. She slipped a small lace handkerchief into his palm. But we shall meet again very soon. I promise you that. Before Christopher could pull her back, a throng of revelers, led by Lord Spencer, pushed past them toward the champagne fountains. By the time Christopher shoved his way through the laughing aristocrats, the midnight blue gown had vanished into the foggy London night. He looked down at the handkerchief in his hand. Embroidered in the corner, in silver thread, was a single elegant letter, M. The following 3 weeks were absolute hell for Christopher Danvers. He was entirely consumed by the ghost of the Comtesse Mathilde. He scoured London's elite circles, attended every dreadful salon and endless opera, searching for a glimpse of midnight blue velvet. He hired private investigators from the Bow Street runners to watch Monsieur Laurent's residence, but they reported nothing. The Comtesse had evaporated. His obsession destroyed his affair. Lady Clementine, furious at his distraction, threw a crystal decanter at his head and stormed out of his townhouse forever. But Christopher hardly noticed. He was a man possessed. Then, the financial blow landed. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Christopher was summoned to his study by Mr. Cavendish, the senior partner of London's most prestigious wealth management firm, who handled the Ashcroft estate. Christopher assumed it was routine paperwork regarding his wife's late father's railway dividends that funded Christopher's lavish lifestyle. Cavendish, however, looked remarkably grim. Your Grace, the solicitor said, refusing the offer of a brandy. I am here to inform you that your access to the Ashcroft accounts has been entirely severed. Not a single penny remains at your disposal. Christopher scoffed, leaning back in his leather chair. Nonsense. My father-in-law's will clearly stated. Josiah Ashcroft was a shrewd man, Cavendish interrupted smoothly. Before his death, He utilized the Married Women's Property Act. He transferred every share, every land deed, and every liquid asset into a blind trust. The sole beneficiary is your wife, the Duchess. She now has absolute independent control over millions of pounds, and yesterday she issued an order to freeze your allowances. The color drained from Christopher's face. The Mayfair townhouse, the tailors, the horses, all of it was paid for by the Ashcroft money. He was essentially bankrupt all over again. "Send a telegram to Cornwall immediately," Christopher snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. "Tell the Duchess I am coming to Highcliffe Manor." Cavendish adjusted his spectacles. "That will not be necessary, Your Grace. The Duchess is not in Cornwall. She is here, in London. She has acquired the grand mansion at number 12 Belgrave Square, and she has requested your presence there at 3 o'clock. At precisely 3 o'clock, Christopher's carriage pulled up to the towering, imposing gates of the Belgravia estate. The house was magnificent, far grander than his own. A line of disciplined footmen escorted him through halls lined with fresh orchids and priceless French art. He felt a sickening sense of vertigo. How had his quiet, terrified wife orchestrated all of this? The head butler opened the grand double doors to the drawing room. "The Duke of Oakhaven, Your Grace," the butler announced, before bowing and closing the doors behind him. The room was bathed in the soft afternoon light. Standing by the towering bay window, her back to him, was a woman. She was not wearing the drab, olive-green wool he remembered. She was wearing a perfectly tailored day dress of deep, vibrant emerald silk that hugged her slender figure. Her hair was a cascade of spun gold. Christopher stopped dead in his tracks. The scent of Parisian jasmine and orange blossom hung heavy in the air. He watched the mysterious woman slowly turn around, her beauty silencing the room just as it had at the royal ball. She wore no mask today. The heavy, wire-rimmed spectacles were gone. Her striking sapphire eyes locked onto his, burning with a calm, terrifying intelligence. "Who are you?" Christopher whispered, his voice trembling as reality shattered around him. She smiled coldly, stepping forward with the lethal grace of a predator. "Your wife, Your Grace." Christopher staggered backward, his legs hitting the edge of a velvet sofa. He collapsed onto it, unable to tear his eyes away from her face. The cheekbones, the jawline, the subtle shape of her lips. It was Matilda. The Comtesse Mathilde de la Roche was Matilda. The woman who had haunted his every waking thought. The goddess he had fallen desperately, madly in love with on the dance floor. Was the wife he had thrown away like garbage. "Matilda," he choked out, his chest tight with a violent mix of awe, shame, and sheer terror. "How you look." "I look like a woman who refuses to fade into the damp wallpaper of Highcliffe," she finished for him, her voice dripping with ice. She walked over to her mahogany desk and picked up a piece of paper. It was a replica of a letter. "She hasn't the spine to object, nor the wit to care," Matilda read aloud, perfectly quoting his own cruel words. She dropped the paper onto the floor at his feet. "You underestimated the field mouse, Christopher, and now the trap has snapped shut." "I was a fool," Christopher breathed, sliding from the sofa onto his knees. The great Duke of Oakhaven, a man who bowed to no one, knelt on the Persian rug before his wife. He reached out to touch the hem of her emerald dress, tears of profound regret stinging his eyes. "Matilda, I beg you, forgive me. I did not know you. At the ball, I fell in love with you. I am completely yours." Matilda looked down at the broken man at her feet. There was a time when his apology would have meant the world to her. Now, it meant absolutely nothing. "You did not fall in love with me, Christopher," she said softly, stepping back so his hands fell to the empty floor. "You fell in love with the silk, the perfume, and the illusion of a woman you could not have. You are a shallow, arrogant man who sold his title for gold and then despised the hand that fed him." Christopher looked up, his face pale with agony. "What are you going to do?" I am going to rule, Matilda said, walking toward the grand doors. She did not look back. You will keep your empty title, Christopher. We will remain married in name only to satisfy society. You will live on an allowance that I dictate, and you will never publicly shame me again. If you step out of line, I will ruin you. The Duke of Oakhaven belongs to me now. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind her, echoing with absolute finality. Christopher remained on his knees in the empty, beautiful room, surrounded by the overwhelming scent of the only woman he would ever love, a woman he had owned, ignored, and lost forever. Did the Duchess's ultimate revenge leave you speechless? If you loved this tale of betrayal, transformation, and high society drama, please hit that like button and share it with your fellow history lovers. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, real-life, inspired historical stories delivered right to you every single week. What would you have done in Matilda's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. Today,
Hi, my name is Silent Alpha Care, the owner and manager of Silent Alpha Care. After watching the video, she humiliated the Duke, then he risked everything to claim her. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What stood out to me most was the tension between pride and vulnerability. Both characters seemed to carry strong emotions beneath the surface, and it made the story feel less about revenge and more about understanding someone beyond a single moment. Sometimes people make mistakes in public, but what matters is what they choose to do afterward. Do you think the Duke truly forgave her, or was there always some hurt left between them? And if you were in her position, would you trust someone willing to risk everything for you after such a painful beginning? I think stories like this quietly remind us that relationships often grow through honesty, humility, and second chances. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy emotional historical romance stories like this, feel free to like and subscribe to Silent Alpha Care for more.